Welcome back to Fingerstyle Ukulele with me, Matt Stead. I'm super excited because today we're going to have a look at our first piece of repertoire. We're going to have a look at the piece Sigh Waltz, the first piece from your book. We're going to have a look at using the good form that we learned in the first two videos. We're going to strum and pick this entire piece chord melody style, just using our thumb, and I'll go into a lot of detail about that. In the second part, we're also going to lengthen out the arrangement by creating a more kind of rhythmic strum style version of the piece, which hopefully you'll find quite interesting. So we're going to actually go off the page, and don't worry, I'm going to explain it all and show you how you can extend that arrangement to make it even longer and more interesting. So before we do anything else, I'll play through the piece for you with that extended break, and you can just sit back, relax and see how it sounds, and then we'll start to break it down and I'll teach it to you measure by measure. Let's have a listen. Now, before we get on to actually playing the piece, let's just talk very briefly about what kind of arrangement this is. So this is a chord melody arrangement. That means we have a melody, which sounds something like this. We have chords, which would sound something like this. Play it a clever way where we do them both at the same time. So we hear the chord and melody coming out at the same time simultaneously. Now there's two main different ways of playing chord melody. One of the ways is to place the chords in between melody notes. On Freight Train it might sound something like this. Notice we have a melody note followed by a chord. So in effect, we're putting chords in the gaps, there's one, between the melody notes. Now that works really well for kind of more upbeat songs, but something like this one, it would sound like this. Doesn't really work, it's too busy, right? Even if we push the chords later on into the bigger gaps between melody notes, they're too few and far between, so it's not working. So what we've got here is I've worked out an arrangement whereby we play the chord and the melody note at the same time. Now sometimes it's really simple, the melody note is contained within the chord. So the very first chord that we play, the C major 7, because our finger is on this second fret of the A string, we're hearing the melody note, this B note, the 2, coming through. But sometimes we have to alter the chord. The next measure is a C chord, but the melody note is this G note on the 3rd fret of the E string. So what we do is we strum only the top 3 strings. Notice how you get the sound of a partial C chord, because we're still playing most of a C chord, only because we've got this note here, that melody note comes through. Notice also, and I'll talk about this in more detail later on, that my thumb has stopped on the A string to make sure I don't accidentally play it, but also it makes that melody note ring out really nice and loud. On the next measure I have a G7 chord, but the melody note is this low D note, that one there, because we've got da 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 da. So because that melody note is on the 2nd string down, I'm actually only going to strum the top 2 strings of my uke physically. So even though we have a G7 chord, we only hear a tiny bit of the chord, just enough to suggest a G7. But we have that melody note coming out as well. And in effect, that's what we're doing throughout this whole piece. We're adding the melody note to the chord if needs be, or if the melody note is already in the chord, we strum to it. And whenever we've hit the string that contains the melody note, we stop. Now I know I've kind of worked that all out for you, so if you follow the tablature, you'll be right as rain. You don't have to overthink that. But I just thought it was useful just to explain what's happening here. I'm going to be playing this arrangement using my high G ukulele today. If you have your low G ukulele, you can use the low G arrangement, and all of the same principles of everything I'm going to describe is the same. The only difference is that on the 4th measure, the harmonic note, which I'll explain later, rather than being on the G string, is on the A string. Everything else exactly the same. So let's take a look at a piece of music, let's get you playing. So we're going to remember all of those good habits we learned in the first 2 videos. Uke at a 45-degree angle, nice arch coming over here with our strumming, and make sure your thumb's on the back of the ukulele, not poking over the top here. Now the key thing today is we're going to use our thumb to strum everything. Now if you've got a longer nail, I want you to keep that thumb at a right angle to the strings. See here? So it's not like this, it's lifted up. So I'm going to be strumming the strings with the very middle part of my thumb coming down. That's going to use the kind of tip of the nail, which is going to act like a plectrum and give us a really warm tone. If you have no nail on your thumb, you can use the pad of your thumb, and that will still have a lovely, lovely tone. You may have to go slightly more sideways on if you're using the pad of your thumb. Just make sure you don't collapse down completely, because otherwise you can sometimes kind of catch the outside of the nail on a string and it won't sound too nice. So generally, middle part of the thumb strumming down. And also notice that as I strum a chord in particular, like this first chord, most of the movement is actually coming from the elbow. I'm not just taking this thumb and kind of pushing it down, because that would give a kind of a brittle sounding chord. I'm actually keeping the thumb relatively straight and strumming all 4 strings, movement coming from the elbow. So the first measure, we strum that C major 7. And whilst that's ringing out, we hit the next two melody notes, a C, 3rd fret of the A string, back to the 2nd fret where you started. Then we play 0, 0, 3. I often call this a C to a G chord because it's like we've taken a C chord and we've added this G note to it. Now, because we're only going to strum the top 3 strings physically, you don't have to keep that finger on the A string if you don't want to. You could keep it there for kind of safety in case you strum too far, but we're just going to do that 0, 0, 3. Now, the important thing with this part is that as you strum down, really push into the ukulele with this arm so that that G note really rings out. Try not to do this. Kind of take your arm away, try and push in towards the uke and finish with your thumb resting on that A string so you don't accidentally play it and you get a nice strong sounding chord. That will make the first phrase something like this. Then we're going to take away this finger and hit an open E string. Now the next measure, we have the top 2 strings of a G7. And you can finger your whole G7 if you want to, or as long as you're careful not to strum too far, you can take everything off but that 2nd finger on that 2nd fret. Now I try to match my fingers to the frets as much as possible in this first bit. So if a note falls on the 3rd fret, use your 3rd finger, 2nd fret, 2nd finger, 1st finger, 1st fret, 1st finger, and so on. Okay? So now if I put that all together, the first phrase will sound something like this. Really lovely, isn't it? Keep it nice and mellow. We're in waltz time for this one, 3, 4 times. So if you're counting along, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Excellent, have a little try. Now, if you look at the tablature for the next measure, measure 4, it looks like we're playing the 12th fret of the G string, which in a way we are, but we're going to play a lovely harmonic note, which almost kind of tricks the ear into hearing a note that's an octave higher than it should be. You can tell on your sheet music that we're going to be doing that, because if you look super carefully at the note, you'll notice that the actual note of the staff in the sheet music has a diamond head, a diamond shape, rather than a circle. That tells you that it's a harmonic. Now there's a couple of ways to play harmonics, and these are really, really tricky. This is a difficult thing to do. So right off the bat, if you struggle with these harmonics and you still want to play the arrangement, it will sound perfectly fine if you just hit that note as an open G. So that would make the first 4 measures. Just an open G. Still sounds pretty, okay? So don't sweat it, but let's have a look at the harmonic. What we need to do for harmonics is we need to trick the string into think that it's playing an octave higher. And the way we do that is we touch the string at the 12th fret. Now, using 2-hand harmonics, what we do is we take any finger on our left hand and we place it over the metal 12th fret. Now this is really, really crucial. When I say the 12th fret, I don't mean the open gap between the 2 metal frets. I mean physically over the metal fret wire. And it's the 12th one, so it's the right hand side fret. So if you've got 2 dots on your ukulele, which you often have on your 12th fret, it's the metal fret to the right of that. And I'm very, very lightly going to touch the string. I'm not pushing down. If you push down, it won't work at all. A feather light touch, I'm just touching the string. Then with my picking arm or my picking hand, I pick the string. Now, even without lifting away, you should get a very rough harmonic. If it sounds like this, you're pushing too hard. If it sounds like this, you're not touching at all. So just touching very lightly, you'll get this sound. And then to make it ring out beautifully, as soon as you've picked that harmonic, take your finger away. So see how a normal G string or G note would sound like this with the harmonic. Isn't that pretty? Really lovely. Now that can take a heck of a lot of practice. Once you've got it, you can try it on all the strings. It's a really, really pretty technique. Now there's another clever way of playing the harmonics that I really like, and that's a one-hand harmonic. What we do is we take the fingertip of your picking hand and we place it in exactly the same place we did with this one, over the metal fret of the 12th fret. Okay, just like that. And I'm just very lightly touching the fret. You have to watch your finger not to move too much one way or the other, just very lightly touching over the fret. Then I place my thumb about 3 or 4 frets behind it. Okay, can you see it's like this? That allows me to pick the string with my thumb whilst removing my index finger. That gives me a one-handed harmonic. Now it's quite tricky. You've got to make sure your thumb picks ever so slightly first and then this finger comes off. It's almost like a peeling away, almost instantaneous, but the thumb is ever so slightly sooner than the finger coming up. If you take the finger off too soon, you'll get that sound. If you take it off too late, you won't have much of a harmonic. So have a little practice. And again, you can practice that on all 4 strings. The benefit of this harmonic is tricky. Might take you a few weeks to get this. Don't expect to get it straight away. Have an experiment. But a beautiful thing about this harmonic is I don't need to move this left hand at all. I can keep it in place whilst I hit the harmonic. That's a really lovely thing to do. Just before we practice that, always remember if you're struggling with any of this, bring the tempo right down. It's really crucial to get the timing right and then up the tempo later. So even if you play it as slow as this, so you're giving your brain time to send those signals to your fingers and give you time to hit the harmonic. We'll do it ever so slightly faster, but take your time with this. Follow after 3 with me. We're going to do the first 4 measures, including that harmonic. 1, 2, 3. Fantastic. And if you're struggling with that harmonic with the open G, 1, 2, 3. Just ping that G string. Lovely. Okay, now the next few measures we do the same thing. It's pretty much repeating the same melody, only this time when we do the harmonic, it's going to be on the A string at the 12th fret. 1, 2, 3. Now notice if you're holding the full G7 chord down, which you don't need to, just make sure you take your finger away off the A string, or you can just play that 0, 2, be absolutely fine as well. The next bit, it just really helps if you use the correct fingerings on the left hand for this one. So when you play the final measure of that first line, try using your 2nd and 3rd fingers when you do this A minor chord. The reason it's called an A minor add 9 is because it's an A minor chord and we've added the 9th note of the A scale, which is a B. Now you might think there's only 7 notes in a scale. Just imagine you've kept counting through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You come to a B. Don't sweat the theory too much, but we're using our middle 2 fingers, 2nd and 3rd, and we're strumming down with our thumb. Then use your little finger to come over here and hit the C string. Try and keep this shape down as much as possible as you hit those notes that follow it. And then resolve that to an F chord. And that's the reason we're using those middle 2 fingers. Notice once I've played this chord and the melody notes, I can keep this finger down and really comfortably hit that F chord. Next measure the same. And again. This time when we go to the F, we add our fingers to the second and third frets of the A string. Then we have this interesting G chord with a D melody note. Now, the way I play that, and you'll have noticed in the video, is I like to finger a full G chord and then move my little finger up to the 5th fret, like that. I'll play the phrase starting with the last measure of the first line. Here it is, G chord. And then I extend this little finger out. If you are doing it this way, you've only got to reach with the very tip of your little finger into the 5th fret of the A string. You can even use the side part of your little finger, just enough to get the pressure on. Now there is another way of playing this G chord with the high D note, which some people will find a bit more comfortable. And that's to use your little finger on the 5th fret, as you would imagine, and then use your index finger for this D note, the 2nd fret of the C string, and your second finger for the G note, the 3rd fret of the E string. This ring finger looks like it's doing something, it's not, it's just kind of trying to stay out of the way. Now that has one benefit. If I was to do the measure that comes before it, I can take this pinky up, little finger up, and place those two behind it. And a lot of people will find that more comfortable. Have an experiment, see what suits you. What we'll do is we'll try the last measure of the first line going into that G chord. Okay, let's give it a go. Remember, middle 2 fingers. 1, 2, 3. Up we go, and we can add that chord in. Now there's another G chord that follows this G chord, and to add a bit of texture to the piece and a little bit of dynamism, what I like to do is I like to differentiate the two. The first G chord I strum as normal, just like we just did with my thumb coming down. The second one I take the nails of my right hand, it doesn't matter if you haven't got long nails like me, any nails will do, and I very lightly and quickly strum down with those nails. Very light, I'm barely touching the strings, but I'm not slowly, it's quite a fast down strum. Now if I put that together with the measure before, it'll sound like this. See how it's almost like an echo? And it just hints at a differentiation there, which is really sweet. So have a little experiment with that. For this next part, we're taking the melody up the fretboard now. If you watch my first 2 videos, we're playing notes from that C major scale that went up the A string. All of these melody notes are notes from that C major scale. And because the C major chord is made up of the C, E and G notes, which is your top 3 strings on your ukulele open, we can kind of create a lovely flow of melody notes while still hearing a C chord over the top. That's what happens at the start of the next section. Now, if we take a look at measure 17, it's really important to think about our fingerings. It would be tempting to start the 7th fret using our little finger, but that kind of means that you'd have to move it up to the 8th for the next note. Or if we start with our index finger on the 7th, I'd have fingers to move up, but then nothing to come back with. So what I'm going to suggest is you use either your 3rd or 2nd, I like to use my 3rd finger, as I pick the 7th fret of the A string. We're going to strum down with that thumb again, nice, gentle, slow strum. And without interfering with any of these top 3 strings, because we want that C chord to ring out, we hit the next few notes. And you can use your little finger for that. That means our index finger is free to come back to the 5th fret for measure 18. Reach up with your 3rd. Then we have a lovely chord, this A minor chord. The reason it sounds kind of mysterious and a bit more interesting than this chord is just kind of where the notes fall. I'm actually playing, an A minor chord is made up of the notes A, C and E. And I'm playing I'm playing a C on this fret, the 5th fret of the G string. I'm playing an E on the 4th fret of the C string. And then we have an open E. So the first 3 notes we have C, E, E. And those 2 E notes together are what gives it that really kind of wistful quality. And then we get the A note at the end. Just, some people might not find that interesting, but that's why it sounds so lovely, I think, when we play an A minor up there. And it's a useful one to remember, this A minor up the fretboard. So let's piece it together from measure 17 through to that A minor chord. Okay, so 3rd finger down. 1, 2, 3. And that A minor. Now we have a harmonic on the 12th fret of the A string. You know how to do that. Again, try not to touch any of the strings as you do that, because if you do, you're going to deaden that chord. So just touch the string that you need to. Okay. After that, we go even higher. We're starting at the 10th fret and coming down. So I like to use my little finger at the 10th fret, allowing me to reach back to 8 and 7. And then I can do 8, 7, reach back to 5, and our A minor. So after 3, that will sound like this. 1, 2, 3. Notice how I used all my fingers to reach back as I did that, to keep it really satisfying. And after that, we'll add another of those harmonic notes. Again, if you struggle with that harmonic notes, just hit an open A and it will still add a bit of punctuation and sound really sweet. Now we're nearly there now, actually. Amazing, isn't it, how simple a chord melody can be? Let's have a look at the last measure of that 3rd line down. We hold an F chord down and we just simply add our 3rd and 4th fingers for the melody notes that follow. We flip to a G major now, lift off this finger for the open A. So notice as I hit that G chord, I only lifted up that 2nd finger to hit the open A when I needed it. By keeping the other 2 fingers down, it allows the chord to ring out. Same with that F chord, try not to interfere with any of the other strings. So the chord still rings out, lift up. We do the same again. One more time. This time we start with a G chord, little finger comes on the 3rd fret of the A string, up to the 5th fret of the A string, and then you could even move that little finger back, or I like to just readjust to a C chord at the end. That gives us. Okay. Let's try it from measure 25, the last measure of the 3rd line down. 1, 2, 3. Really nice. Now you might notice that there's a funny symbol at the above the very last chord. Kind of looks like a dot with a rainbow over the top. That's called a fermata. It's one of my favourite musical symbols. It means a note or a chord of indeterminate length. And all really it refers to when we're playing ukulele is you hit that last chord and then you allow it to ring its natural course. So don't be tempted to dampen it too soon. Just allow your ukulele to breathe, and your ukulele finishes the song for you. Whenever it stops playing, that's when the piece has finished. Lovely fermata there at the end. So take that slowly, work through measure by measure. Remember, practice at a really low tempo and then gradually increase it a little bit each day. Don't feel you need to get this piece straight away. Take your time with it and really enjoy it. In the next video, we're going to elaborate on it by adding that strummed section that I did in the original video, just so we can see how we can take a shorter arrangement and lengthen it and make it more interesting, turn it into a full arrangement. I'll see you there.